represent their different wards, to have a voice for the people who live the closest to them. And so having that representation means that then those folks, the mayor and the city council, get to nominate and appoint a department commissioner. That department commissioner is over the department, which means that those 14 people are not overseeing day-to-day operations, but instead they have a commissioner that helps everything to operate smoothly. And then again, you have a much larger and expanded Department of Public Safety that allows all of the other qualified professionals that you need to keep everyone safe. And so how do we put this, how will we put question 2 into practice? How will we make sure that this department happens? Well, it's important to remember that question 2 is the only concrete plan to make a series of things happen. One thing is that I know some people have heard this like 30 days, all this has to happen. The reality is that only thing that needs to be in place for sure is within 30 days, the mayor and city council members get to nominate and appoint that commissioner that I referenced. And then they get to have a data-driven and community engagement process in order to establish the number and type of qualified professionals, including police officers, who will be in the department. And most, if not most, elected officials agreed, including the current mayor, that that process should happen through an ordinance process, that it should be data-driven, and that the people of Minneapolis should have a say about who's in their department. That gets to happen with voting yes. Then they can also, again, establish a budget that supports all of these qualified professionals. That is going to take longer than 30 days, which I think none of us are surprised about. So while that transition takes place, the police department will continue to operate in their day-to-day response and operations and patrol until there can be a smooth integration of the police officers that are currently in that container of MPD to be fully integrated into the Department of Public Safety. And there is an ordinance currently in place and has been in place for many, many decades because of good governance with the city of Minneapolis that actually is the what they call the establishing ordinance that establishes the police department. And that will remain in place until a smooth transition happens, which is not beholden to a 30-day timeline. So just so you can see that all again, because I know that our opposition has been like shouting something about no plan when we've been saying the plan over and over and over and over again. We had to say it many, many times over. And so you can all see it in front of you again. This is what we get to create together. That is what the people of Minneapolis get to create together and have and actually take a real step forward. It also moves at the pace of the city because it's going to involve community engagement. So why do we need to change the charter? Don't we already have an Office of Violence Prevention? Are we already taking steps to make sure that mental health providers can have some kind of response? Well, you can ask folks who are in those departments. They are vastly under-resourced, and they actually aren't able to be completely integrated with the department. They're not able to be completely comprehensive. And that is because of a whole series of things, but a big one is because of this charter change. Right now, the city charter is set up where it is completely inflexible around budgeting with the city and in policing, in a series of things, quite frankly, because of that minimum staffing being basically what is equal to a contract, the Police Federation's contract in the city constitution, which is unlike any other city in the state of Minnesota. All other cities do this process through ordinance. Minneapolis does not. Minneapolis is also the only city with national headlines about their police department of violence and abuse and mistrust. This is a solvable problem. That means it's just time to update the city charter to meet 2021 and not stay stuck in 1961. So isn't this really about abolishing the police? You may have heard that disinformation, unfortunately, and it is most certainly not. As a fact, this is again about expanding safety so that we have more of what we need to keep us safe, no matter what we look like, where we live, what language we speak. And we get to use all of the tools and all of the resources that are available to the people of Minneapolis. And that includes police officers. Armed police officers will be a part of the department. Oh, okay. So, oh, good. Okay. So I just want to I never want to miss a beat as an organizer of an opportunity to let folks know ways that they can get involved. If you're like, I'm in, this is great, how do I get involved? You most certainly can volunteer with us. I'll drop links also into the chat. There are ways you can hold house meetings, you can follow us on social, all of the good things. And I just want to remind everyone again that this is an opportunity that we should absolutely take right now. As I've said, this has been in place for 60 years. People have been talking about the problem, studying the problem, researching the problem for decades. There is a clear step forward. And the people of Minneapolis get to take that together because it is on the ballot. And that's why we're telling you to vote yes on too. Thank you so, so much. I am incredibly grateful for the time to talk, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Minister JaNaé. Now, as I said before, we'll be opening up to questions and comments and such after both our guest speakers have the opportunity to present. Okay, so now let's have Leili Fatehi from All of Minneapolis. And Sunshine, you can share the screen with her?
Yep, yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I think you're muted.
There we go. Now I should be unmuted. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak with you tonight. Transforming our city's approach to policing and public safety is serious work that requires a serious plan that's developed through the serious commitment of all our elected officials to listen to what our communities need and want. And ultimately, the voters of Minneapolis are going to vote no on question 2 because it seriously fails on all of those fronts. The people of Minneapolis, and especially the majority of Minneapolitans of color, have been clear time and time again that what they are demanding is both an increase in the number of police officers that serve our city and major structural reforms to ensure that those police officers are more accountable and that public safety interventions beyond policing are better funded and more effectively utilized. Minneapolitans have also been clear that the person that they most trust to be a part of leading that future of public safety in our city is Chief Arredondo. But instead of listening to them, what question 2 will do if passed is 1, reduce the number of police on our force, 2, eliminate Chief Arredondo's position, and 3, leave us not only without a plan, but without even a timeline or a process for coming up with a plan for how we're going to keep residents safe and transform our system of public safety. Rather than spend the last year doing that hard work of engaging with the public and coming up with a plan that everyone can trust will put us on a path to having safer communities and more accountable policing and more investment in public safety beyond policing, like the proponents of the charter amendment said they would do a year ago. Yes4Minneapolis and the proponents on the city council have spent the last year campaigning for a charter amendment that is neither necessary nor sufficient to achieve any of these goals. In the absence of a plan, and I will point out that the plan that you just heard as being concrete basically said that the next portion of the plan is to have a emergency ordinance to have a continuation of the status quo until we figure out the rest later. In the absence of a plan, voters have nothing to go on other than the words and the promises and the record of Yes4Minneapolis and these city council members. And that record began on a stage in Powderhorn Park that was emblazoned with the words, defund the police, where those city council members took a pledge that was written for them by what became the organizers of Yes4Minneapolis. And that pledge was to dismantle and end policing in our city. And in the months that followed, those same council members and Yes4Minneapolis organizers stated repeatedly on the record that the goal of the charter amendment that they're pursuing is to defund the police, to reduce the size of the police force, and to foreclose any future attempts at police reform. And then not only did they say it, but they also voted for it. The proponents of question 2 on the city council voted more than a dozen times to cut funding from the Minneapolis Police Department in the middle of a massive surge in violent crime that has been disproportionately impacting neighborhoods of color, as the residents of those neighborhoods have been very publicly pleading continuously for more and not fewer police. All of Minneapolis believes that it is past time for everybody who cares about this issue to roll up their sleeves and to do the work of coming up with an implementable plan. And that starts with voting no on question 2, and then electing and holding accountable leaders who will listen to members of the community. And what we've been hearing from members of the community, especially those from most impacted communities, be they civic leaders like Sharon Sales Belton and Sharon Smith Akinsanya, Mike Gozi, Gloria Freeman, or be they faith leaders like Reverend McAfee and Bishop Howell, or just individual residents, what we're hearing from them is that they feel like they are being spoken about or spoken for in this discussion, rather than being listened to when it comes to the impacts of question 2. Now, our campaign has been engaging with many such individuals. Earlier this month, we launched a 75-person canvas that includes 50 of the canvassers. Of that canvas project are individuals who are themselves North Side residents, who for the past couple of weeks and for the next 35 days, they will be continuing to knock on their neighbors' doors to talk one-on-one about question 2 and what it will and what it won't do for their community. One individual whose story All of Minneapolis has shared is Tito Wilson, whose opinion piece you may have read in today's Minnesota Reformer. Tito is a resident of North Minneapolis, where he also owns a barbershop that serves as a community resource hub. Tito himself has the very unfortunate distinction of having been an eyewitness to the police murder of Jamar Clark, and as such has been a staunch advocate for the need for major structural changes to policing and public safety. But at the same time, he is also an individual that really recognizes, and I think speaks in ways that are reflective of what we're hearing from others in terms of the shortcomings of question 2. And so I wanted to take 30 seconds to play for you some of Tito's own words on the issue. Let me see if I can. 1 second. Properly share my screen.
It helps to have the window open first, and then when you share screen, you can select it. Yep.
I've lived here in Minneapolis, Minnesota now for 21 years. Certainly there's problems with crime. Racism in policing has been around since policing began in this country. Chief Arredondo, I think he inherited a system that, is flawed. I think policing in this country needs to be reformed. But to get rid of the police, I think it would be a disaster. If we abolish the police, scrap the whole system, then what? You reform the police department, you can have public safety and justice. I've lived here in Minneapolis, Minnesota now for 21 years. Certainly there's problems with crime. Racism in policing has been around since.
Stop. Okay, there we go. And so Tito is just, one of the voices that we've been profiling through our campaign. I think in coming weeks, you will see additional voices from the community that we will continue to amplify and to elevate. But, I think the totality of what we are hearing from community members is that, Minneapolitans, they're not calling for the status quo. A vote no against this amendment is not a vote that is coming from individuals that are looking to protect current interests in the current institution of policing. Rather, it is a call for an approach to this transformation in which we have council working in partnership with the community, working in partnership with Chief Arredondo, and with interjurisdictional partners to develop an implementable plan. And then if necessary to make a charter amendment, then voters can be asked to do that. Look forward to answering people's questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody in attendance. I think this is the first time that I requested nobody hop in the chat room before our speakers are done, and nobody jumped the gun here. So thank you. We are going to open the floor to comments and questions. If you'd like to speak, please put your name in the chat room. I'll call you in order. We have quite a few people. I'm seeing 31 people in the room. So I am going to ask to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. If you do have a chance to speak, let's make sure other people, let's give everybody else a chance before you jump in a second time. Okay, here we go. And Joanne.
Hello. This is a question for our first speaker. I know that right now Minneapolis is having a hard time even getting police officers. What gives you confidence that you will find these other people who want to work in dangerous situations? And how long do you think it will take to equip these people to work alongside police officers to accomplish public safety? The counselors, because the few people that I have asked that I know within those fields have told me there isn't any way that they would be willing to go into situations as with a police officer as just a civilian.
Thank you for that question, Joanne. Yeah, so we, beyond working with a bunch of organizations, we also are partners of a couple of spaces that are actually like mental health providers and social workers who are really excited about this approach. And to be clear, the response means that we would not be sending like a social worker into a dangerous situation. We'd actually make sure that there's the right size approach for the right issue, right? So if there was we're not sending social workers into armed robberies, for example, there would still be police officers. The other thing that I think is important to know for everyone in the room is that there are police officers who are also in support of this. The reality is that unfortunately what it's not unfortunate, it is good that we want to keep their anonymity about their support because they are a part of the police federation and that there's usually repercussions, unfortunately, when you say things that you support a Department of Public Safety. But what we imagine is that beyond the fact that there are police officers who currently are like, yes, give us the resources so that we don't keep getting called into these situations that are like not right for us and that we're spread so thin that we actually can't do our job, the things we need to show up for. But also the reality is that they're beyond them being ready to like have that and the mental health providers being ready to also be a part of the department. Okay. So I think I lost my train of thought. I didn't know if I was getting cut on time. but yes, to answer that just more broadly, that yes, this is possible. We also know there's like, a lot of actual departments of public safety and departments that work like this in Minnesota, but also in other communities across the state. So we see this like with the Cahoots program. We see, that there are lots and lots of examples about how this actually works out really well. But you are right, it will take time, as I noted. which is why we have what is not an emergency ordinance, as Leili said, which isn't true. It's actually an ordinance that's been in place since before 1960 that will continue to allow the police department to operate until there can be a smooth transition.
Thank you. Leili, anything to add?
Yes, I think it's an excellent question, and is part of the reason we have these concerns about there being a lack of a plan or even a framework for the development of a plan before people are voting on this charter amendment. I mean, one thing we saw that was that in Hennepin County, when they decided to expand and add, a social worker program that would respond to certain things that previously fell on the sheriff's department, a few months later, we saw the social worker saying, well, we weren't included in the consultation for the development of that program, and therefore the way the program was developed didn't fit the parameters of our training and our insurance and what we're comfortable with. And so, those are the kinds of setbacks that can make programs that otherwise could be successful fall apart. And so, these are, in order to have, a public safety system that people can trust in, people need to trust in the fact that it has a strong foundation, that it has that grounding. And if, from the very start, everything is a question mark, including those major stakeholders who we are asking to play a role in this, transformed system, that's problematic. I think we need to do that consultation up front.
Okay, on the queue is Donna. Donna, you need to unmute. Donna, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm a hostile witness for Minister JaNaé, so just want you to know what side I'm on. First off, I'd like to know how much funding have you gotten from outside of Minneapolis? And then I got a comment.
Okay, so your question.
What's the percentage of funding you've gotten from outside of Minneapolis? I know that Yes4Minneapolis says they have gotten about 30%. And maybe I can be corrected on that, but I had heard that you guys got your funding, about 80% of it comes from outside of Minnesota.
Thank you for your question, Donna. I honestly, I don't want to misspeak and say how much or what the percentage is that's outside of Minnesota or within Minnesota. That is something I can follow up with the organizers of this to get out to everyone. But what I do think is important to name is that this organization came together when we got those 22,000 folks to sign a petition in Minneapolis to create this Department of Public Safety. It has really been largely led by Black women.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. You answered my question. I'm sure you could send me the information. And then I also got that little flyer you showed us, about, if you need someone to help you with someone that's mental, you can call this department, or if you need someone, you put it up. So if you need a social worker, you can call this department. And all that can happen without changing the charter. All of it can happen. In fact, the Minneapolis police had a program like that, and it's hurting badly because they've been so underfunded. It's called co-responders. I know you live in St. Paul, so you probably don't know this. So, but what the charter change would do is fire Rondo, who is very popular with the Black community. The Black community, they call him Rondo. And it would have police, if necessary. Well, we need more police now. and there aren't any. We've lost over 200 and the city council is not making any moves to replace them. We need them now. So I'm not trusting that if I voted yes on that, we would get the necessary protection from the police. And the next thing is that there's no sure funding tax base for funding the police. So that's what would happen if we voted yes. So I will close with that.
Okay. And thank you. Leili, did you have anything to add? And Minister JaNaé, if you have anything to add too, please jump in here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to bounce the ball back and forth.
I will defer to, I will let JaNaé respond first.
Okay, so I appreciate your comments, Donna, and I hear in your voice the genuine concern and the desire to really want to keep people safe. And I share that with you, which is why this particular plan was created in a way to be able to do that. And again, to move at the pace of the city. I do want to correct you that Chief Arradondo will not be fired. That is not at all a part of this charter change. Just removing that position from the city charter is what happens, in the same way that the Minneapolis
Chief Arradondo already said that if
Donna, we need to let the speaker answer, okay? Thank you.
And also just regarding Chief Arradondo, it's been already named. There was a story that just came out with Fox 9 that there's no real guarantee that he would stay regardless of what happens with this charter change. He's actually due to retire. And so we can't make long-term policy decisions based on one person. Again, though, he has the ability to stay within the police department that will be within the Department of Public Safety, and he would have position and power within that. But I did want to name that. And also that many of the officers, as you named, have left. And that is because of a whole series of issues, but they've really been naming the fact that they have felt stretched, that they have not felt appreciated, that they haven't been able to do the job that they came in to do. This is an opportunity to really provide the real resources and support to officers who are being called into duty and are being stretched and shouldn't be doing a whole series of things. And just to also name, the city council members did vote in to be able to fund more officers. That's just as you named, they're having a really hard time getting them. And I do believe that police officers would be far more excited to join a Department of Public Safety if they knew they were getting fully resourced, trained, and had the kind of trust from community members that really is needed. Do your job well.
Thank you. Leili, anything to add to that?
A couple of things. I mean, I agree that police officers would be much more excited and apt to join a department where they feel like they are fully resourced and funded. But unfortunately, I mean, there is nothing in this charter amendment that provide for that full funding and resourcing. And if anything, it would be the other way around. The charter amendment eliminates the funding formula that is used to generate the revenue source that the city uses for funding a certain level of police staffing. Now, without that funding formula, we're now, you know, if the claim is that we're going to be able to maintain the same number of police officers, plus add all of these other services, you know, what's missing is how this pie of money is magically growing when we're also getting, the charter amendment gets rid of the funding formula. So there is something missing in that equation there. I think ultimately, you know, and the city council members themselves have said on the record that a consequence of this charter amendment would be that the number of police goes down. On the point of Chief Arradondo, I think, you know, we don't even need to rest the issue on the personality of Chief Arradondo himself, while, you know, he is an individual that clearly Minneapolitans have placed an enormous amount of trust in as a leader to help usher in the future of the city on this issue. But what Chief Arradondo said is that the reporting structure that would be set up by this charter amendment would compromise the city's public safety and be so wholly.
Leili, you just muted yourself. Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
No, I was
unmuted.
trying to mute other people and I accidentally hit you. I'm sorry. I was
All
just
right, what
trying
I
to.
was saying is, you know, what he said wasn't even specific to him. I mean, what he said was that the reporting structure that this charter amendment would set up where one would need to report not just, to the mayor or just city council, but to 13 city council members and mayor would be so wholly unbearable for any law enforcement leader. It wasn't specific to him. And so I think, that is a major consideration for members of the public, for voters, as especially against this backdrop of wanting more police.
Thank you. Next in the lineup, Kelsey is asking to speak. Kelsey, can you unmute?
I can, yes. Hi, my question's for Leili. And this has to do, I think this is something you would agree with, that currently a big problem with the police department is the reality of accountability and how they have to respond to the community. Because right now it doesn't feel like they're siloed and not really held accountable. And so I guess my question is how your suggestions for the saying no would hold the police responsible and accountable to the community, because that's sorely lacking.
So I think one of the major obstacles that we have to police accountability, and I think, majority of people would agree with this, are things like the controls that the Police Federation have in their collective bargaining agreement with the city. Things that in order to be able to change, reforms would need to happen at the state level. And so I think, a major thrust and focus of our elected leaders at the local level should be on organizing and lobbying that effort at the state level to get the kind of changes that we need to the arbitration laws that right now are keeping us locked into a collective bargaining agreement with the police union that basically allows that, every time we fire a cop, a few months later, they're able to reinstate that officer pursuant to that collective bargaining agreement. So, I think that's a portion of it. The other portion of it is that, the charter amendment, if anything, erodes accountability and transparency for the police. And this is something we've seen reflected across departments that are simultaneously taking direction and reporting to the city council and the mayor. One of the things that has been reported from study and findings across these departments is that there's very little accountability and transparency because there's no ability to set priorities and measure anything against them. There's no clear line of authority or accountability between, the head of a department and the overseeing elected. That's one of the things that is different about the police department. You have a direct line of not just reporting, but a direct line of accountability to the mayor. It becomes much more opaque when you're adding 13 other policymakers, any one of which may be directing orders. And also, this city council, I think part of the what we've seen in this process for this charter amendment is that they have not upheld the standards of accountability and transparency, and even getting this charter amendment to the ballot.
Thank you. Okay, moving on.
I was going to say, could I have an opportunity to respond?
Yes, but can you
I'll
be
be
quick?
super
The
quick.
people are docket. Yep.
I'll be super quick. So just want to name, it sounds like you don't have a plan, Leili, about what to do about accountability and transparency. And this actually does. This notion of leaving it to the state representatives and senators and governor is not actually grounded in reality. As a person who has been fighting at the state legislature for the past 5 years around police reform and accountability, we couldn't even get them to agree that police officers shouldn't be a part of the KKK this year. That's a problem, right? But the city of Minneapolis gets to do something concrete this year, and it actually adds this ability to leverage some real control putting it back in the power of the city and taking some of that from the police federation, which the police officers have been operating on an expired contract because they already have their contract. Everything else on top of that is just gravy. And that contract is within the city charter. It's time to actually be able to say, we can have a say about your disciplinary actions. We can have a say about having some real transparency. The fact is that the people of Minneapolis should know when discipline takes place, but we see that statewide papers have to sue in order to get that kind of information. That should not be freedom of information. Those things can happen when you have citywide accountability and not just the mayor.
There's nothing in this charter amendment that changes the collective bargaining agreement that the city has with the police federation, unless what you're telling me is that you're going to pass a charter amendment and dismantle a department literally to get out from under a collective bargaining agreement.
Oh, not at all.
I imagine is not what you are claiming, in
That's
which
not
case
at
the
all.
city council is going to be bound by the same state laws as right
And-
now. That problem doesn't go away.
I thank you both, but we have other people waiting to ask questions and such. So I'm sure the conversation you're having now, I'm sure will continue as more people speak. Okay, thank you. And it's great to see this open dialogue going on. Mpathic is in the, Mpathic, I don't know your first name, I apologize. Did you want to speak or did you just want to leave your comment in the chat box?
No, I'll be happy to speak. My first name is Mary.
Mhm.
I want to go back to Donna's question, which I think Minister JaNaé did not really answer. Minneapolis already had a program in which it was co-sponsored by Hennepin County. And Hennepin County provided social workers, mental health workers to work in tandem with the police. And as Donna stated, because of COVID, that it became more difficult, to deliver those services just as everything else closed down. But now that we're missing so many people in the police department, it's even more difficult to get it up again. Meanwhile, virtually the whole mental health advocacy community, like NAMI, N-A-M-I, has been lobbying for the city to join up with the county and to strengthen the county program, which is already lacking in funds, as Donna said, instead of trying to compete and set up a whole new city program in which they would hire their own mental health workers and they would work with the police. Now, the problem is that the city is not set up to do this. The park board does not build bridges, or they don't run schools, and the school board doesn't build highways, and neither does the city provide mental health services. They are not in a position to take Medicaid. They are not in a position to bill providers. They are not in a position to access HIPAA records. They are not in a position to access patient records. And they are not in a position to provide aftercare. So you would have social workers with none of these supports, no infrastructure, no authorized funding such as the county gets from the state to do any of these things. So why would Minneapolis try to set up a whole new competitive mental health police collaboration when one already existed with the very organization, the county, that is set up, funded, mandated, and has the infrastructure to do it? That seems absolutely crazy. And you must know that there is not only a shortage of funding for these kinds of programs, there's also a great shortage of social workers. And so the city would be in competition with the county in hiring social workers. Now, I just want you to know that this is not just my position that I made up here in my kitchen. It is what mental health advocates, all of them, have been begging the city to do for 2 years. There have been documented meetings with Councilmember Cunningham about these things. These are facts that I'm citing to you, not opinions.
Thank you, Mary. Would our speakers want to briefly respond, both of you? And I know it's hard to be brief on this topic.
I hear you, Mary. And you're absolutely right. All of the things you named are exactly why we need a Department of Public Safety. And I'll tell you why. The reality is what you named is true, that programs like COPE, that like the Hennepin County program that was really about co-response, that it was vastly underfunded, that it didn't have the political power or leverage to be able to be properly resourced. And that meant that it couldn't get to the kind of scale that it needed. And that's because we keep trying to piecemeal together and patchwork together a program that isn't actually comprehensive, though we want to call it that. And so this plan is one in which we don't force these different departments to compete with one another for funding. The reason that I say that we actually can't do this without changing the charter is because the way the current charter is set up that requires this police-only response, it also, as Leili mentioned, it has a particular formula model that equates to about 35% of the city budget. And so that means that all of that has already been beholden and benchmarked, right? Instead of actually using data about what are the kind of calls that are happening across the city, what kind of professionals should we be deploying to these different kinds of calls and circumstances? How are we actually staffing this that makes sense, both financially, but most importantly, in a human sense? And then making sure that because that it's gonna look different in different places. There are higher numbers of 911 calls in wards like 4 and 5 than there are in like 11 and 12. Why do they all get the same number of police officers? That's actually racially inequitable and it makes no sense. They also don't get mental health professionals and homeless prevention outreach. And also, just to name those programs that you named, like COPE, they only work between certain hours. They weren't integrated with the department in the way that they actually should be. They didn't have the infrastructure to function the way that they really could to be powerful for the city. Having it comprehensive and integrated allows for that to finally happen. But I definitely hear your concerns, and that's why this plan has thought through a lot of those missteps that we've seen in trying to piecemeal it together.
Leili, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that Mary makes is exactly, why All of Minneapolis is saying that, this charter amendment is neither necessary nor sufficient to get the kind of outcomes that we all hope for. It's not necessary because, we can have public safety beyond policing, and by definition, anything that is beyond policing is already within the purview of the city council. That can happen without a charter change. And where the obstacle is, if it's with the resourcing, if it's with the coordination, nothing about this charter amendment provides a fix for those kinds of issues. Those are issues that need to be fixed through good collaborative leadership, that the best way to get to is by electing city council members that will work in good faith with experts, with interjurisdictional partners like Hennepin County, who will trust in the professional staff and civil servants to do that data-based work up front before recommending, a wholesale change to a system sight unseen.
Thank you. And Brenda is asking to speak. Brenda Short.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. You're okay. Good.
So my question goes to the yes right now. You're saying, first of all, where is this funding going to come from? Because I'm doing the math, right now we've let go of many police officers, bringing our neighborhood unsafety to our community, and this movement that you guys cause has been very, very disappointing to me. And I have to say that because it started with abolish the police. First of all, I don't think anyone wants their job to be abolished, making them feel unwanted by our citizens. I've lived in this neighborhood for many years, and I would never want somebody to abolish my job because someone else did something. And I'm very, very sad because I'm studying numbers about the city right now. And the last number that I heard was on Friday of $35 million given to police officers because they didn't want to no longer be in Minneapolis, and they're taking work comp and being settled out. So if we just gave away $82 million, and if you want me to break down the numbers, I'll be happy to break down the numbers for you. But $35 million was the last number on my chart. And how are we supposed to, because most of the funding comes from the citizens who live here, and they are, I don't know about anybody else, but I was never asked to sign anything about this. Yes, I was never asked anything. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of it until all of this news population and me doing my research. None of the groups attached to the Yes was from Minneapolis. It was all outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, different other little cities. So I'm trying to figure out how the Yes program got in my neighborhood. And I'm like really into my neighborhood because I'm out there every day. I walk the streets on Saturdays and everything, and no one has addressed me or any of my neighbors. And I'm just really want to know your perspective of where the funding is going to come, because if the funding is coming from the city and the city says they don't want this to happen, why are we got this on the ballot anyway? That's my question.
Okay, if our speakers would like to address Brenda's concerns.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. And thank you for your leadership and work and wanting to see a safer Minneapolis. And I appreciate your questions. So I can name definitively that the majority of leaders and organizations that are with Minneapolis, with Yes4Minneapolis, live in Minneapolis, they own and operate their businesses. We have over 35 small businesses that are based in Minneapolis, brick and mortar, that their legislators and leadership are in Minneapolis. The families are in Minneapolis. Now, there's a series of reasons why maybe you didn't get the door knock. We were out petition when, they were out getting petition signers in January and February of a bitter cold winter. But I will also say, I wanted just to touch on this issue of funding. So the reality is that there is a funding infrastructure, as you named. The people of Minneapolis make sure that they fund the police department as is right now. And so the Department of Public Safety would also be funded in a similar way. And the reality is beyond the $200 million that goes into the current police department, or nearly $200 million that goes into the police department. There's also, as you mentioned, that $30 million that we're seeing around workers' comp, which I've addressed these issues that we're seeing, like even within the infrastructure, the current infrastructure of MPD doesn't work for anybody in Minneapolis, and it sure doesn't work for police officers, is what we're seeing. The other thing is, the $60 million that we're seeing in lawsuits from people who have rightfully sued the police department for a whole series of issues, from death to beatings to sexual assault. And so there's definitely funding. The other reality is that this is about what keeps the people of Minneapolis safe, what allows them to have trust, what actually decreases crime over time. And that is, again, a data-driven, community-driven process. This actually allows the city to be really good stewards of all of their resources. And so I'm very excited that we actually can directly address this question around funding, because this is really also another benefit to this particular department.
So you're saying you're self-funded, because you still didn't answer the question, where's the funding coming? Because most of our city funding comes from our property taxes, which I'm a property owner. And I spoke to many businesses in my area. I live South Minneapolis, and I still talk to them. I talk to them every day because I want to know how they feel about it. And none of them said, no one talked to me as a business. And where's this list? You said many businesses. Where's this list? So we know why y'all, I just really am concerned because I don't feel that the community was heard. I don't really feel that. I would never stand by this movement. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to stand by this movement because I feel that no one really had. This is probably the second time I've heard someone spoke about it, and the first time was last week when I was at another city meeting in the Little Earth, and they expressed that, and I'm like, no, you still haven't told me where these funding coming from, because just like the previous speaker, she said most of your money came from outside of Minneapolis. But if you get into our charter, then that money will be coming from the citizens who live in Minneapolis, such as homeowners and business owners and taxpayers. And we didn't ask for that. So I'm trying to, I'm going to ask you again, where is this funding coming from? Because we're already in debt from Justine, $20 million, George Floyd, $27 million, and $35 million to the police officers who feel that their jobs was not necessary, and they decided to take a leave from us, and we paid them out because that's what happened. So where are your funding coming from besides us? Because I feel that your funding is coming outside of the city of Minneapolis and the community.
Are you talking, I'm sorry, just for clarity, you're talking about the funding for the Department of Public Safety?
Yes, ma'am. Because you keep on saying you have the funding already. That's what I heard.
I mean the city of Minneapolis.
The city of Minneapolis don't have the funding because the funding would come from us. The property team.
The city of Minneapolis is able to fund all of these lawsuits around abuse and murder.
They're not able to fund it. That's why it's hitting the property taxes. That's why I'm paying attention to the number.
That's just for clarity. Taxes are literally
no idea what she's talking about.
Taxes are literally the tangible way that the city funds everything. So that you are right in your assessment that it would be through city taxes.
Okay.
They're funded now.
Yeah. I am going to need to move on because we have other people in the queue right now.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you both. Somebody named Raquel would like to speak, and then we're going to go to Julie.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to mention that the thought of having the chief accountable to the city council is scary to me, because we all know that at some point they all stood up on a platform to say they want to abolish the police, and then months later their tunes started to change. And so the other part of that is that our own city council member wanted to abolish the police and yet wanted the city to pay for her own security. And in working with our council member representative just on traffic issues, we cannot get anywhere. So how can I trust at the moment, right? I don't even know who's going to end up becoming my city council member. How can I trust that there's not going to be chaos if this charter passes?
And I'm going to ask each of our speakers to answer that. I know it's hard to answer that briefly, but let's go for that, okay?
I guess I usually just end up answering first, not because I want to take space, but I know these questions seem to be addressed to me. So thank you, Raquel, for your question. So the police chief, whoever is the hierarchy of the police, the reality is the infrastructure of it would be set up like all the other city departments. So the mayor and the city council members would together agree on a commissioner. That department commissioner would be who the folks in that department respond to, would report to. So it would not be this issue of having to report to a bunch of people. It's really them being able to have some say about what keeps folks safe, and they get to do that through the people who live in their community. And as you named, you've had a hard time with your own council member, and that's a benefit of democracy. Folks get to have a say about who their leadership is, and then that leadership gets to represent them. And we get to see in real time that representation happen through a Department of Public Safety, which currently that is not what we have. So there is no transparency or accountability right now. Well, but the city of Minneapolis can start to finally have that. So I do appreciate your question.
Thank you. Anything to add, Leili?
Yeah, so I'm going to respond to Raquel's question, and at the same time, I mean, touch a bit on the points that Brenda was raising. I mean, you know, this is kind of the central concern, is this nexus between where does the money and the funding for all of this come from, and then who is it that we are trusting post amendment to be making, you know, the entirety of the decisions here, and that in and of itself, I mean, seems to be the problem, is that, you know, we are being asked to put our trust, to vote for this amendment and then put our trust behind the same city council that did take that pledge to defund the police. And, you know, Brenda is asking this question of, well, where is the funding for all of this going to come from? And so far the answer has been, and this is the reason that we continue to say that this amendment, you know, paves the path, and it doesn't even pave the path. I mean, it makes it less than a step removed from defunding the police. I mean, essentially the answer that you're hearing is that by removing the funding formula that earmarks, that allows the city to levy taxes to pay for the staffing of police, it eliminates that funding mechanism, it eliminates that staffing requirement, so that the city council can defund the police and then use that funding to pay for other stuff. What that stuff is to be determined based on who gets elected next and therein after. So it does leave a lot of those question marks about what does the future look like, and we have no answers. We have no answers as to post-amendment. What do people see? What do even these council members see as being an appropriate level of staffing? They won't give a clear answer. They've been all over the board. You know, 6 months ago, they wanted to defund and to abolish when that became, or to defund and reduce the number of police. As that started to not poll well, now, of course, we're going to continue to have police in conjunction. I mean, you know, there's not a fully fleshed out plan for people to be able to put their trust behind, and that is the number one thing we are hearing from community members, is that they simultaneously want to see more police and they want better, more accountable police.
Sure.
They want both, and both can happen. This amendment does neither.
Okay. Now, Julie has been waiting, and it sounds like her question is a repeat to a question that Minister JaNaé answered regarding her group. So Julie, can you pose your question, please?
Sure, yeah, I was just asking that question. I know Brenda had some questions about who is involved in the Yes4Minneapolis coalition. I'm wondering if all of Minneapolis, if Leili could answer that question as well.
Yeah, All of Minneapolis is a pretty broad-based effort. We have supporters from across the city in many different communities. A lot of these folks are the ones that, you know, I mentioned that you're seeing knocking on their neighbors' doors. They are local individuals that have concerns about this amendment, but who see, you know, the need for having a well thought out implementable plan. And so they have joined both to oppose this amendment, but to also, you know, make clear to their neighbors and to join together to say that, you know, once this amendment is defeated, we do need to do that hard work of holding our leaders accountable and doing that engagement to come up with an implementable plan. But you know, we have folks that are of all ages, of all races, from every ward in the city that are involved as volunteers, as canvassers, as funders. We're you know, a locally organized and funded effort.
Thank you. Now I'm seeing a lot of chat in the chat. We're coming to time, and that's great. This is what we're here for, is to communicate and share ideas. We're coming to the end of our scheduled time. Couple of things. We want to give each speaker 3 minutes or so apiece to close off what they're saying after everybody has a chance. So we have time for one more question and comment if we can hear from somebody who has not yet asked questions or spoken. Okay, Wayne, that's you.
All right, thanks everybody for your time and sharing all this information. Probably more of a comment than a question. Right now, the public safety in Minneapolis is out of control. Crime is at an all-time high. We have two sides that's saying, if we get the ball, then we'll do this. We're currently right now, to a degree, y'all both have a share of the pie and things are out of control. I feel like a child that's in the middle of a divorce as my parents fight it out. And in the meantime, I'm seeing young men, young children getting shot dead on the street while you guys try to figure this out. So for me, whoever wins this, I beseech you, I ask you to go back to whoever your parties are, all those names on that list. And in the meantime, to figure out what's going on right now. If public safety is a real desire for you, then right now, you won't wait till November, you won't wait till voting ends, that there will be some semblance of something being done now. Because right now, we're in a crisis situation, and it seems like no one is putting their full effort into solving it. And then we have to wait until November or December before that happens. So again, I beg you, as we're on the streets and every night we're hearing the gunshots, we're reviewing tape of people being murdered in our neighborhood. And those with power in both of y'all camps have not risen to the occasion. And so it kind of concerns me, it scares me that after all is said and done, that these same people who to a degree have failed us now, we have to put our trust in to walk us through this next season. So again, I don't know if it's a question, but more of a comment, but please understand the concern for us as citizens that this is not a game, this is our lives. Please do right by them. Thank you.
Okay, Leili, do you want to go first on this one if you have anything to add? No.
No, just an acknowledgement that I hear you, I take your words seriously. I acknowledge, I mean, you know, the system and the leadership on many levels over many decades has failed to produce a policing and public safety system that works for everyone. I mean, I think this is, and that keeps people safe, and especially in moments of crisis like this. I think this is where Minneapolitans are unified in the demand that there is, I mean, a need for change. Where our two groups differ is in terms of how it is that we should go about doing that. But I think, you know, where everybody should walk away from this, both today and in November and every day in between, is the exceptional need to hold our elected leaders and everyone in a position of influence to account for doing that hard work to ensure that it doesn't continue this way.
Thank you. Minister JaNaé.
Yeah, Wayne, I hear you. I definitely hear you. And I agree with Leili that the folks who are doing this work, for the most part across the board, no matter what side of the issue they're on, and they really do want this change and they want it to happen. Not necessarily, as Leili also mentioned, we disagree about the how, but we also disagree about the when. You know, the reality is we have been going on this circle, throwing out ideas, but not actually making any concrete changes. No reforms with teeth have happened. And folks are dying. They're dying by community violence, they're dying by police violence. And our current policing model, the armed police only response, it's not working. And it's not working for anyone. This is an opportunity to take, quite frankly, it is a small step. It's just really making the city charter similar to the rest of the state, but it is a step for the people of Minneapolis to finally get to have a say about what keeps them safe. And that's what this is all about.
Thank you. Well, we're coming on to time. I am going to ask in a moment both our speakers to do quick closing comments. It's hard to be quick because this is a topic that's so important to all of us. And then we have a few announcements after that. So we're closing to questions. Let's see, it's been a long evening. Minister JaNaé spoke first at the beginning. So Leili, I'm going to give it to you to open with a few quick closing comments, and then we'll hear again from Minister JaNaé.
Great. Thanks, everyone, again, for your time and for all the great questions and comments. You know, I think again, Minneapolitans really, we do all want to see a future for policing and public safety that serves to keep everyone safe and is more accountable and just. But in order to get there, it is imperative that we first listen to those individuals that are most impacted, both by crime and by police brutality. And again, overwhelmingly, what we are hearing from folks is that they want to see the deep transformational and structural changes to policing, but they also want to see more police now that can respond to community challenges, and that you know, they want to see Chief Arredondo continue his leadership in this capacity, where this amendment simply will lead Minneapolis voters to vote no, is that it presents no plan for creating safer communities or for reforming the police. It both by the words of its own proponents, will reduce the number of police that we have on the streets. And as we have heard from Chief Arredondo himself, would create a situation that would be wholly unbearable for him or any other law enforcement leader. So in addition to eliminating his position, you know, it all but guarantees that reform-minded police leadership like him would be absent should this amendment pass. So we encourage voters to vote no and elect leaders that will work in good faith with each other, with the mayor, with the chief of police, and with community members on coming up with a planful, implementable approach to changing policing and public safety that'll be durable and collaboratively based. Thank you.
Thank you. JaNaé?
Thank you. Yeah. So the people of Minneapolis all agree on one thing, that everyone should be safe, no matter what neighborhood they live in, the color of their skin, how much or little money they have in their pocket, no matter their gender or their age. And the reality is the current model of policing does not do that. And there is a block in the city charter that can very easily be removed by saying yes. And the reality is waiting another year, another 10 years, another 60 years, which is how long this charter has been in place, waiting for the state legislature, a much larger body of people, to all agree that real reform with teeth should take place, is not grounded in reality, and it's most certainly not putting the safety of the people of Minneapolis in the forefront. This is the year, 1 year after George Floyd was murdered, most certainly in a year where we see the heightened violence in community. This is the year to finally take action, where we see the political will of the people. We already see that the majority are ready to say yes, and that more and more of that majority is growing. Most certainly in Black communities, when they are asked in a polling question, do you want more, the same, or less police? And that is their only option. Of course they say more, because these are communities that have been divested from, that have had their resources taken and extracted, and that they are seeing the heightened violence, that they are the first and hardest impacted, and that this is the only resource they're offered. Yeah, give me more. That makes sense. But if you say, and you can have mental health providers, you can have homeless outreach, you can have substance abuse treatment, you can have the things that you actually need to be and stay safe in community, and we do it at the pace of the city, you get to have a say. There is a community involved process in order for this to happen, then they say yes. But when they're told that this is about abolishing the police or defunding the police, again, that this charter change is not grounded in and does not do just by saying yes. What it does say is that you get to expand public safety. And that is why we are excitedly with Yes4Minneapolis, why there are leaders and members and community folk and businesses who are really ready to finally, in this moment, the time is now. As Wayne mentioned, this is an urgent cause now. As Donna has named, as all the folks who have named, even those who are against this charter change, they know that the time is now. So why keep waiting? Take the first step forward and get involved in the community process. Start that now. Start those conversations now, and vote yes. Yes on two. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. This has been quite an amazing evening. I want to thank everybody here. When I hear whichever way you're leaning on the issue, when I hear this much intensity and passion around the need to make our city a better place, I'm feeling really proud to live in Phillips tonight. Thank you. This is, we have a reputation to be in the thorn of the side of the city. Let's continue doing that because we get things done here. So